Uh, So today we are going to start with a new idea that is called as your internetworking, right? Up till now, what we have discussed so far, we have discussed LANs, WANs, and then what are the devices which are working inside LANs and WANs, and then different networking technologies which are being used, right? There are different technologies which are being used inside internet, right? Like ATM, Ethernet, frame relay, or like that, or something like that, right? Now, I would like to tell you regarding these technologies. Make sure these technologies are being used in different networks, right? Let's suppose if Ethernet is being used in one network and ATM or frame relay is being used in another network, right? It is very difficult for these three networks to communicate with each other, right? Like, if there are certain similar networks, they can communicate. But if we have two different networks, two different technologies are being used in different networks. Now, let's suppose one, we have a LAN which is using Ethernet, right? Like a bus or any topology that is being used. Another network which might be using a frame relay, right? Another network that is being using FDDI, right? We have gone through all these terms and we know that every नेटवर्किंग टेक्नोलॉजी हैज इट्स ओन प्रॉज एंड कॉन्स. ठीक है, हर एक जो भी आपके पास नेटवर्किंग टेक्नोलॉजी है, लाइक ईथरनेट हो गया, आपके पास फ्रेम रिले हो गया, एफटीडीआई हो गया या एटीएम हो गया, हर एक का अपना फ्रेम फॉर्मेट है. व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इट्स ओन पर्सनल फ्रेम फॉर्मेट, सो there is no problem if they are going to communicate with each other inside a same network, right? But once they want to communicate across the network, I mean to say that अगर हमारे पास चार different networks हैं और उन चारों different networks के अंदर चार different technologies use हो रही हैं, one is using ATM, one is using Ethernet, another one using FDDI, and one is using another technology, right? So all they have different frame formats. Now, once they wants to communicate, देन देयर कम्स अ प्रॉब्लम. ठीक है, अब इनको हम कैसे कम्युनिकेट करवाएं? स्विच तो आपका एक ही नेटवर्क के अंदर यूज होता है. आई मीन टू से दैट इफ इट इज एन ईथरनेट स्विच, इट वुड बी यूजिंग inside an ethernet network. if it is a token ring based switch, तो आपके पास वो टोकन रिंग नेटवर्क के अंदर यूज हो रहा होगा. ठीक है, एटीएम स्विच है तो एटीएम नेटवर्क के अंदर यूज हो रहा होगा, राइट? बट इफ देयर इज अ सिनेरियो दैट एटीएम network wants to communicate with an ethernet network, right? Our FDDI networks wants to communicate with an ATM network, then what happens? There comes a new device that I would like to tell you. So first of all, I'm just going to make a base for you guys that what actually I'm going to tell you today, or what I'm going to teach you today regarding this particular idea, right? So this is what we are going to learn today in this particular chapter, right? So the concept that is being called as your internetworking. I mean concepts, architectures and protocols. ठीक है जी. So how we are going to create an internet network. Now see, what is an internet? I have told you that internet is a generic term. In generally, if we are talking about an internet is something, the combination of LANs and WAN. And if we are talking about an internet specifically for a particular usage, we are going to say that what we are browsing over an network is called as an internet, right? So these are the two terms which are very much resembling, but they are different at a different table, right? एक हमारे पास इंटरनेट होता है जिसे हम कहते हैं इंट्रानेट. I mean to say that different LANs and WANs are connected and they are going to communicate with each other by using different technology. That is what you can call it as an intranet. And that intranet, when we are talking about in a general form, this is called as an internet. और internet में हमारे पास क्या होता है? We might have a routers, we might have a switch, we might have different type of technologies which are combined together to give or facilitate the other users to use an internet services, right? So what is the motivation for an internet networking? So I'm going to read it for you. No single networking technology is best for all needs. Now what does it mean? It means that, I mean now what I mean by the networking technology means like we have studied regarding an Ethernet. We have ATMs, frame relay, FTDI. These are the different technologies which are being used in different situations. I mean, अगर हमारे पास बस नेटवर्क है, टोकन रिंग है, स्टार नेटवर्क्स हैं, तो हमारे पास different I mean situations के अंदर different technologies use हो रही हैं. And we have, and for each technology and each networking technology, there are different devices, there are different frame formats which are being used, right? So they are not best for all needs. ठीक है जी. अगर हमारे पास स्मॉलर नेटवर्क है, मे बी हमारे पास ईथरनेट इज द बेस्ट टेक्नोलॉजी. अगर हमारे पास एक वैन है एंड इट इज एन एंटरप्राइज नेटवर्क, ईथरनेट इज नॉट वर्किंग प्रॉपर्ली. ईथरनेट इज नॉट good for that situation. Might be we are using FDDI, maybe we are using token networks or something like that, right? So a large organization with diverse networking requirements needs multiple physical networks, right? If we have a single LAN or LAN inside a one building, we might be using a single, I mean to say that network, there must not be any problem. But if there is an enterprise level organization with diverse networking requirements, I mean they have different hardwares, different softwares, and different something like that. So they require multiple physical networks. I mean they require their different sites which might be connected with each other by using different devices, right? And I will be telling you that device, that what is that specific device which is going to connect multiple physical networks. That's the conclusion, or that is the end of our today's lecture, right? If the organization choose the type of network that is best for each task, the organization will need several types of networks, right? So the interconnection of two or more networks, usually local area networks, so that data can pass between hosts on the different networks as though they were one network, right? This requires some kind of router or a gateway. Now see, this is something very important to understand. If you want to connect two or more different networks together, right? They might be a local area network, or they can have multiple type of technologies which are being used inside those particular network. We must need some sort of intermediary device. But these devices might not be like repeaters, like bridges, because they are going to be failed inside this particular situation, right? For that, what is a specific device that is being used? This is what you can call it as a router or a gateway, right? These are the terms that we will be using. Gateway is some specific term that is being used for a specific router, लेकिन आपको specifically याद ये रखना है कि router is a device which is going to connect multiple networks together to communicate across different networks, right? So the concept of universal services. The chief problem with multiple networks is a computer attached to a given network can only communicate with other computer attached to the same network. This is very similar situation कि अगर हमारे पास एक नेटवर्क है जिसमें हमारे पास मल्टीपल कंप्यूटर्स अटैच्ड हैं, तो वो सेम नेटवर्क के अंदर तो कम्युनिकेट कर सकते हैं, बट इफ दे वांट टू कम्युनिकेट अक्रॉस द नेटवर्क, आई मीन आउटसाइड ऑफ द नेटवर्क, देन देयर इज अ प्रॉब्लम. In the 1970s, large organizations began to acquire multiple networks. Like each network in an organization form an island, employees had to choose a computer appropriate for each task, multiple screens, keyboards, and computers. I mean, nowadays we know that there are multiple sites, multiple networks. Now they want to communicate, they want to share their screen, they want to share their different sort of hardware devices or something like that. For that particular situation, you need a network that is called as, or that service that is called as your universal service, right? So what is a universal service? A communication system that supplies universal services, allows or battery pairs of computers to communicate, right? I mean, it is a system, or it is a set of computers, or it is a set of services which are going to provide, which is going to be provided by different companies, that might allows different set of pairs of computers to communicate across a network. That's what you can call it as a universal services given by or provided by different companies. Universal service is desirable because it increases individual productivity, right? So this is a basic idea. I mean, regarding the universal service, actually what it is, that multiple computers can communicate across a network by using same technology. That's what you can call it as a, that communication system is being called as your a universal service, right? So the concept of universal service, so now we can come across the concept of internetworking, what an internetworking is. Despite the incompatibilities among networks, researchers have devised a scheme that provides universal services among heterogeneous networks. Now, there are few terms which are being used inside this particular slide. Incompatible, I mean, which are not compatible with each other, different networks, right? And then heterogeneous network. One is called as your homogeneous network, which are the similar networks. Heterogeneous networks are those networks. I have given you the example previously in the previous few slides, that the network which might be using an ATM technology, another one is using frame relay, the one is using Ethernet. Now these are different types of heterogeneous networks. ठीक है, इनको हम कहेंगे कि ये heterogeneous network हैं, they are not an homogeneous network. So that is what you can call it as an called internetworking. Use both hardware and software. I mean, when you want to communicate with, or communication is being maintained among a heterogeneous network, that sort of networking is called as your internetworking, right? They might be using both hardware and software together. So physical network, connection with router. A router is special purpose system dedicated to the task of interconnecting networks. A router can interconnect networks that use different technologies, including different media, physical addressing schemes, or frame formats. अब देखें, now this is very important thing to understand. Now he is specific to a device that is called as a router, or you may call it as a router. So a router is a special purpose system dedicated to the task of interconnecting networks. A router can interconnect networks that use different technologies, including different media, physical addressing schemes और frame formats. देखें, मैंने आपको एक चीज़ बताई थी, LANs और WANs. LANs जो हैं, they are using switches because they are the same network. Inside the same network, they might be using local area network, they might be using a switch, and switch always works inside a local area network. ठीक है, उसमें आपके पास different network technologies नहीं होती. But when we want to communicate across a network, across a different network, right, like WANs or LANs, or different sort of MANs which wants to communicate with each other and form a bigger network. In such situation, the connectivity between multiple networks required an intermediary device, and that intermediary device is known as a router. ठीक है, अब हमारे पास जो मल्टीपल नेटवर्क्स हैं उनको कम्युनिकेट या उनको कनेक्ट करने के लिए जो डिवाइस यूज होगी, दैट डिवाइस इज बीइंग कॉल्ड एज योर राउटर. बट मेक श्योर राउटर इज एन स्पेशल टाइप ऑफ कंप्यूटर. It has an operating system that is called as an iOS, Internet Network Operating System. It has ROM, it has RAM, it has flash memory. I mean, all the things which a normal computer have, it also contain all these things. ठीक है, उसके अंदर हर चीज होती है. I mean, you can have the memory, ROM, RAM, and when it boots up, it is going to get information from its ROM. I mean, each and everything, it has its own operating system, it has its physical memory, virtual memory, each and everything is being present. So it is a special type of computer, and it can be, I mean to say that you can modify certain sort of instructions inside the router. You can give certain sort of instruction by connecting that router with the screen, and you can have multiple commands that you can give to the router, and based on those particular commands router can act accordingly. कि अगर आपने कोई VLAN बनाना है, आपने कोई पासवर्ड सेट करना है, ठीक है, राउटर के ऊपर आपने कोई पाथ सेट करना है, let's suppose you want to set the next hop, you want to set certain sort of passwords, you not need to put certain security on different sort of ports. All these things can be managed by using a router. I mean, आपको router के interface पे connect होना पड़ेगा. You have to log in into a router by different, and you have a command prompt, and through that particular command prompt, by using certain set of commands, you can manage the whole router, right? So the basic idea to tell you each and everything is that कि आपको पता होना चाहिए कि what actually the router is and how it looks like and what is the main functionality of a router, right? So a router can interconnect networks that use different technologies. अब ये बड़ी important चीज़ है कि use different technologies. इसका आपको पता होना चाहिए कि different technologies means ATM, frame relay, Ethernet, FTTH, these are the different technologies. ठीक है, अब आपको I mean if somebody asks you that what I mean by or what you mean by different technologies, I think most of you are knowing that I think examination का schedule आ गया है आपका mid term का और final exam का, ठीक है? तो it is also possible कि individually, yes, this is not possible but this is mandatory that we have to take an one-to-one viva जिसमें आपके पास individual viva होगा. तो these are the terms that I might be asking during the viva and all these things, so you should be very much clear regarding these things, right? So including different media, physical addressing schemes or frame formats, and you know that there are different frames formats for different sort of networking technologies, and when they want to communicate with each other they have to use a central device, that is what you can call it as a router, right? So hopefully that is clear to you guys. Now this is what the diagram is, physical network connection with a router. अब देखें अगर ये diagram आपको clear है, नजर आ रही है, so we do have a central device that is called as a router, that is in square type body that is being present between the two clouds, and we are going to represent these clouds as a individual network और इंडिविजुअल फिजिकल नेटवर्क, ठीक है जी. ये आपके पास इंडिविजुअल दो डिफरेंट नेटवर्क्स हैं जिनको हम कम्युनिकेट जिनको हम कनेक्ट कर रहे हैं बाय यूजिंग दैट पर्टिकुलर सेंट्रल डिवाइस, एंड दैट सेंट्रल डिवाइस इज कॉल्ड एज राउटर. अब क्वेश्चन ये है कि देखें ये चीज़ बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट है समझने के लिए. व्हेन आई हैव स्टार्टेड लर्निंग कंप्यूटर नेटवर्क्स, तो काफ़ी सारी ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो बहुत ही अरसे के बाद जाके हमें क्लियर हुई थी, and we are just going to understand them कि ये ऐसे ही होता है, and we are not clear regarding that. The thing is, and that what I am going to tell you, router के साथ कभी भी directly computers connect नहीं होते. ये चीज़ आपने understand कर लेनी है. राउटर के साथ हमेशा networks connect होते हैं, right? अब ultimately you are not you must have a question that what are networks. Networks are something like LANs or WANs. अब LANs और WANs are the combination of computers, लेकिन उनका एक इंटरफेस जो है वो आपका राउटर के साथ कनेक्ट होता है. हम कभी भी ऐसे नहीं कह सकते कि you are going to say that an individual computer is directly connected to a router. We can connect our individual computer with a router in different modes. अगर हमने राउटर को कॉन्फ़िगर करना है, if you want to configure a router, yes, you can directly connect your router with a computer, and by giving certain commands you can set the router so that the router can act according to the network administrator instruction. कि अगर आपने कहना है कि जी इस राउटर के अंदर ये पासवर्ड होना चाहिए, ये नोड्स अलाउ होनी चाहिए, ये नोड्स नहीं अलाउ होनी चाहिए, इन पाथ्स के जरिए आपका डेटा जाएगा, ऑल दीज थिंग्स, ये प्रोटोकॉल्स कॉन्फ़िगर करने हैं हमने. दीज थिंग्स कैन बी मैनेज बाय एन इंडिविजुअल कंप्यूटर. वो एक बहुत ही स्पेशल सिचुएशन होती है जिसमें the network administrator is going to configure your router by connecting directly with the admin panel of that particular router, right? But normally when you are going to connect your router with different networks, तो इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि आपके different networks के जो interfaces हैं they are being connected with one of the interface of a router. ठीक है, ये चीज़ कभी नहीं आपने सोचनी कि आपका कोई individual computer connect होगा आपके router के साथ. Yes, when we are talking about a switch can have a directly connected computers. Switch के साथ आपके directly connected computers होते हैं. We know that there are 24 ports on a switch. Your computers are directly connected with a switch, and switch is going to work on a net data link layer and flam. We know that we have discussed so far, right? So you have to keep this thing inside your mind that we have routers. Router is a device which is going to connect multiple networks together. Right? इस चीज से आपने सारी उम्र नहीं हटना. I mean, this is the basic idea that you have to learn right now, and when inshallah in future if you are going towards this particular field, तो this is a very basic idea कि जी राउटर आपका जो है वो डिफरेंट नेटवर्क्स को कनेक्ट करता है, ठीक है, और जो आपका स्विच है वो आपके पास इनसाइड अ लैन यूज हो रहा होता है, एंड इट इज गोइंग टू कनेक्ट मल्टीपल कंप्यूटर्स, राइट? सो दिस इज वेरी मच क्लियर टू यू गाइस, राइट? अब इन दो नेटवर्क्स के अंदर क्या है, वी डोंट नो, इधर इट इज अ लैन, it is a WAN, either it's an ATM network, FDD है, we don't have to bother about it, but these are the two different networks, और different network की definition ही ये है कि इनका frame format different होगा, right? So, Internet architecture organizations seldom use a single router to connect all its network for two reasons. Because the router must forward each packet, the processor in a given router is insufficient to handle the traffic. Redundancy improved internet reliability. Now see, you will never say that organization would be using only a single router to connect all its network for two reasons. ठीक है, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि आपकी एक बहुत बड़ी organization है and you are going to say that router is a very expensive device, so I would be using a single computer or single router to connect multiple sites together. No, that must not be the case. पहली situation तो ये है, जो इसने लिखा है ये तो इसने खुद से लिखा है, but I would like to say that your router only have a one serial connection. ठीक है, अब देखें, अब मैं थोड़ी डिटेल में आपको जा रहा हूँ, मे बी आप समझ रहे हैं या नहीं समझ रहे हैं। राउटर टू राउटर कनेक्टिविटी हमेशा सीरियल कनेक्टिविटी होती है, ठीक है, दैट इज द सीरियल कनेक्टिविटी। इफ आई वुड बी गेटिंग टाइम आई वुड बी showing you that particular connectivity, right? So अब देखें आपको ये devices, everybody can see my screen right now?
Yes sir.
Okay, ये screen नजर आ रही है आपको, ठीक है जी। अब देखें, you can see in this particular diagram you have a network devices, you have end devices, you have IoT and all these things। अब देखें नेटवर्क डिवाइसेस में हमारे पास ये राउटर्स हैं, ये सारे के सारे जो आपको नजर आ रहे हैं ना, दिस सिचुएशन दीज ऑल आर द राउटर्स, ठीक है। ये आपके पास सारे के सारे स्विचेस हैं, ठीक है, दीज आर द हब्स। अब ये आपके पास हब्स हैं एंड दीज माइट बी द वायरलेस डिवाइसेस, दिस इज द सिक्योरिटी फायरवॉल्स एंड दिस इज द वैन एमुलेशन, अगर हमने वैन को कनेक्ट करना है और समथिंग लाइक दैट। अब देखें, अगर आपके पास राउटर है, this is one router and this is another router, अब इसको कनेक्ट करने के लिए you might have, I mean this is an internal configuration। अब अगर आप इसको बैक एंड पे देखें ना, अब this is the I mean when you click on this router, जब जैसे ही हम इस पे क्लिक करेंगे ना, तो ये उसका फिजिकल बैक एंड दिखा रहा है आपको, zoom in, this is zoom in, right? When you click on this button it will be on, it will be off, मतलब जैसे बटन होता है हमारे पास, ठीक है। और ये आपका सीरियल इंटरफेस है, इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग, विक कवर, यस, यस, एक्चुअली पावर ऑन नहीं थी उसकी, मैंने पावर ऑफ कर दी थी तो उसमें पावर ऑन नहीं थी। अब देखें, इफ यू कैन सी दिस पर्टिकुलर राउटर ऑन द बैक, आप if you can read this interface card providing two serial ports, अब इसके कितने, दो सीरियल पोर्ट्स हैं हमारे पास, तो दो सीरियल पोर्ट्स का मतलब ये है इसके साथ आपके पास दो नेटवर्क्स कनेक्ट हो सकते हैं, राइट? व्हाट डज इट मीन? इट मीन्स दैट इसके साथ दो से ज्यादा नेटवर्क कनेक्ट हो ही नहीं सकते, राइट? दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग टू अंडरस्टैंड। लेकिन जब हम लैन स्विच की बात करते हैं तो लैन स्विच वी माइट हैव I mean to say that 24 computers that might be connected with each other, right? So this is the auxiliary port and then you have RJ45 और Cisco 1941 series router, this is right। तो मैं जस्ट आपको दिखाने का मकसद ये है कि इन अ सिंगल राउटर यू मैक्सिमम आपने यहाँ पे एक इंटरफेस लगाया, दो सीरियल पोर्ट्स आपको मिल गए, ठीक है। यू कैन सी सीरियल 1, सीरियल 2, राइट? एंड यहाँ पे अगर आप एक और ये लगा देंगे तो आपके पास दो और आपको मिल जाएगा। आई मीन मैक्सिमम 4 ports आर द 4 networks that you can connect with a single router, right? And to connect multiple routers together you might have the connectivity that is called as, ठीक है। अब ये आपके पास कनेक्टिविटी है कि आप किस तरह से दो राउटर्स को आपस में कनेक्ट करते हैं। अब नाउ सी, अब जैसे ही मैंने इसके ऊपर क्लिक किया तो दिस इज गोइंग टू शो यू डिफरेंट कनेक्शंस। अब इसमें देखें, इफ यू कैन सी पोर्ट, सॉरी, अब देखें इसमें गीगाबिट ईथरनेट डाउन, gigabit ethernet 1 is down, serial 01 is down, 1 down, 1 down, I mean सारे के सारे आपके पास जो लिंक्स हैं वो डाउन है आपके पास। ठीक है, फिजिकल लोकेशन, इंटरसिटी, होम सिटी, कॉर्पोरेट सिटी एंड लाइक समथिंग लाइक दैट। लेकिन राइट नाउ यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस थिंग दैट टू राउटर्स कैन बी कनेक्टेड टुगेदर राइट इनसाइड अ वैन्स। तो यहाँ पे जो चीज बताने की है ना वो ये है कि router must forward each organization seldom use a single router to connect all its network for two reasons। आपके पास ऐसा नहीं होता कि आप एक ही नेटवर्क, एक ही राउटर को यूज करें और उसको यूज करते हुए आप डिफरेंट नेटवर्क्स को कनेक्ट करने, क्योंकि आपके पास इतने ज्यादा ऑप्शंस ही नहीं होते। यू डोंट हैव द इंटरफेसेस थ्रू व्हिच यू आर गोइंग टू कनेक्ट 10 or 15 networks together. No, you have to use multiple routers to connect multiple networks. That's what। अब उसके रीजन क्या है? Because the router must forward each packet, the processor in a given router is insufficient to handle the traffic. I mean, if you are going to connect multiple networks with a one router, it is very difficult for a router to, differentiate the traffic. And second is redundancy improve internet reliability. I mean, if you have multiple paths using a router, if one path is going to be failed, the other path would be taken by the router। अगर आपके पास एक path या एक जो वे है वो फेल हो जाता है तो आप सेकंड वे के जरिए उसको कनेक्ट कर सकते हैं या आपका डेटा उस पाथ से जा सकता है। बट इफ यू ओनली हैव अ सिंगल राउट और सिंगल पाथ, तो इफ दैट पाथ इज गोइंग टू बी फेल्ड और दैट पार्ट इज नॉट वर्किंग प्रॉपरली, देन योर डेटा वुड बी लॉस्ट एंड इट इज नॉट अ गुड वे to form a network, right? That is the main reason you might not be connecting a single router with your network. You might be using multiple routers to connect them together, right? So an internet is consist of a set of networks. Now I'm on the slide number 13. An internet is consist of a set of networks interconnected by the routers, and the internet schemes allows each organization to choose the number and type of networks, the number of routers to use to interconnect them, and the exact interconnection topology। अब देखें इस चीज की explanation मैं आपको आगे दे रहा हूँ। Now this is what you can have a diagram in which you have the multiple networks, and multiple networks are being connected by using three different routers। ठीक है, आप ये देखें, this is a one router, this is a second router and this is the third router, they are being connected with each other। अब इसमें देखें कि अगर आपके पास, now this is in a single line, it doesn't mean that they are in actually in this particular connection। ठीक है, ये आपके पास multiple shapes में भी हो सकते हैं। So what I mean to say that these routers are used to connect multiple networks together। So if any one of the path is going to be disconnected, or if any one of the path is going to be malfunctioning, if it is not working, then the path for your data would be taken by an other router। ठीक है जी, आपका जो डेटा है that would follow an other router to reach at a particular destination। Let's suppose अगर आपके पास ये वाला नेटवर्क, अगर हमारे पास एक और यहाँ पे राउटर है, ठीक है, let's suppose यहाँ पे एक राउटर है और वो नेटवर्क कनेक्टेड है and then it is being connected with this internet। तो अगर ये वाला पाथ हमारा फेल हो जाता है तो it would be taking the same path to reach to this particular destination, right? So this is very important thing to understand that multiple paths इसलिए होते हैं या multiple routers इसलिए होते हैं because if there is one problem in one path, then their alternative path must be there and your data might be sent through that particular path for the destination। This is what I would like to tell you regarding the internet architecture, and I have told you previously your internet architecture is a combination of multiple routers। ठीक है, आपके पास बहुत से राउटर्स होते हैं जो इंटरनेट आर्किटेक्चर के अंदर कनेक्टेड होते हैं, तो वी डोंट नो व्हिच पाथ इज वर्किंग, व्हिच पाथ इज नॉट वर्किंग। दिस इज solely रिस्पांसिबिलिटी ऑफ द राउटिंग एल्गोरिथम्स, राउटिंग प्रोटोकॉल्स व्हिच आर वर्किंग ऑन द राउटर कि कौन सा पाथ हमने सेलेक्ट करना है, व्हिच वन इज द शॉर्टेस्ट, व्हिच वन इज द बेस्ट पाथ टू सेंड योर डेटा फ्रॉम वन हॉप to the next hop। I mean to the next hop, I mean to say that कि next hop तक पहुंचाने के लिए हमें कौन सा shortest path लेना है इस डेटा को भेजने के लिए। ठीक है, so that's what you can call it as an internet architecture। So achieving universal services The goal of internetworking is universal service across heterogeneous networks. To provide this service, all computers and routers must agree to forward information from a source on one network to a specific destination. The same thing that I have told you previously, that all routers have to agree upon a same protocol. देखिए मैंने आपको आई थिंक स्टार्टिंग में एक चीज बताई थी, when you communicate over a network you have to follow certain set of protocols. अगर आपके protocols follow नहीं हो रहे you cannot communicate. Like I have told you that when a person is communicating with a Chinese person is communicating with a US person, they do both have the other two different languages. Chinese can speak Chinese, English can speak, or US person can speak English, right? Now, how they can communicate? There must be a third person in between a Chinese and an English person or a US person who can allow them to communicate. अब वो कैसे communicate करवाएगा? Ultimately अगर वो Chinese में बात कर रहा है तो वो उसको translate करेगा English के अंदर, अगर वो English में बात कर रहा है तो वो translate करेगा Chinese के अंदर. So the same thing applies to a networks also. There are certain communication protocols which are being used over a network to communicate any sort of communication over a network. ठीक है, तो अगर आपके पास प्रोटोकॉल्स फॉलो नहीं कर रहे हैं आप तो आपकी कम्युनिकेशन पॉसिबल ही नहीं है. ठीक है, सो फॉर दैट रीजन वी आर गोइंग टू हैव a universal services. अब वो protocols क्या हैं? The task is complicated as frame formats and addressing schemes may differ. The key is universal protocol software that is called as TCP/IP. अब सारे की सारी बैकग्राउंड स्टडी करते 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 हम कहाँ पे पहुंचे हैं? हम एक पॉइंट पे पहुंचे हैं कि जी वो प्रोटोकॉल क्या है, वो सॉफ्टवेयर कौन सा है. दैट पर्टिकुलर प्रोटोकॉल और दैट पर्टिकुलर सॉफ्टवेयर इज कॉल्ड एज योर TCP/IP protocol suite, right? So why they have designed, I think I have told you previously, OSI मॉडल हमने पढ़ा था कि OSI मॉडल के अंदर 7 लेयर्स होती हैं, एप्लीकेशन, प्रेजेंटेशन, सेशन, डेटा लिंक, नेटवर्क और ब्ला ब्ला जो भी हैं. ठीक है, 7 लेयर्स होती हैं. अब दे आर वेरी जनरलाइज्ड कॉन्सेप्ट, एप्लीकेशन, प्रेजेंटेशन, सेशन का. ठीक है, दैट वाज एन ओल्डर कॉन्सेप्ट. अब इसको ओवरकम करने के लिए दे हैव डिजाइन एन स्पेसिफिक प्रोटोकॉल दैट इज कॉल्ड specific protocol suite that is called as TCP/IP protocol suite, which is based upon your I mean to say that OSI model. ठीक है, बहुत ही resemblance है दोनों में, लेकिन वो क्या है we will be doing in detail also. लेकिन अभी मैं आपको बताता हूँ कि एक्चुअली हमारी जो सारी बेसिक डिस्कशन थी ना वो आके एंड हो रही है TCP/IP के ऊपर. आई मीन क्या ऐसी कॉम्प्लिकेशंस हैं, इन सब कॉम्प्लिकेशन पर डिफरेंट फ्रेम फॉर्मेट्स हैं, डिफरेंट डेटा है, डिफरेंट आई मीन इंटरनेट वर्किंग सर्विसेज हैं, दे आर डिफरेंट, हाउ दे कम्युनिकेट विद ईच अदर. So in order to communicate with each other, we must have a protocol suite that would help multiple sites to communicate with each other without any difference. ठीक है, कोई इशू नहीं होना चाहिए. आपका डेटा फॉर्मेट डिफरेंट है, आपका फ्रेम फॉर्मेट डिफरेंट है, वो सारे के सारे जब एक प्रोटोकॉल के ऊपर बात करेंगे तो आपके पास कोई कम्युनिकेशन डिस्ट्रक्शन नहीं होगी. ठीक है, and that particular universal protocol software or universal protocol format is known as your TCP/IP protocol format, right? That is called as transmission control protocol and internet protocol, TCP/IP, right? So you can look upon this particular diagram. This is a virtual network. How it is a virtual network? The illusion of a single network that TCP/IP software provides to users and applications. Now see, you have multiple computers which are connected with a cloud. ठीक है, तो ये हमारे पास virtual network है. virtual network मतलब it is not physically connected. अब ये different computers किस network के साथ connected हैं, किस LAN या WAN के साथ connected हैं, and in turns how they are interconnected with each other we don't know. That is why this is called as your virtual network, the illusion of a single network that TCP/IP software provides to users and its application. This is what you can call it as a virtual network. But conversely हमारे पास actually इस तरह से होता है. ठीक है, you have, if you can see in this particular diagram, you have a physical network. This is a network 3, this is a network 1, this is network 2, this is network 4, and this is network 5. Either it is a LAN or a WAN. We don't have to bother about it कि आपके पास ये क्या है. ये आपके पास ATM यूज कर रहा है, ये आपके पास फ्रेम रिले यूज कर रहा है, ये FDDI यूज कर रहा है, ये Ethernet यूज कर रहा है, ये FDDI यूज कर रहा है. We don't have to bother about it. But your computers are being connected with these networks. These are the computers that you can see. outside of this particular cloud, right? They are being connected with them, and these networks are being interconnected with each other by using a special device that is called as router. ठीक है, तो ये फिजिकल नेटवर्क है और ये आपके पास राउटर है. जो आपके पास पिछला नेटवर्क था दैट इज अ वर्चुअल सॉर्ट ऑफ नेटवर्क. और वर्चुअल नेटवर्क इन actually कैसे connected होते हैं, you can see in this particular diagram that how different networks are being connected with a router, and these networks in turns directly connected with that particular computers, right? So layering and TCP/IP protocols. TCP/IP protocols are organized into 5 conceptual layers. OSI मॉडल कितनी लेयर्स में था, 7 लेयर्स के अंदर. ठीक है जी. जो आपका TCP/IP प्रोटोकॉल सूट है, इट हैज बीन डिवाइडेड इनटू 5 लेयर्स. Although some layers of the TCP/IP reference model correspond to the layers of the ISO reference model, ISO या OSI है. ठीक है जी. तो you don't have to be confused regarding this. The ISO layer schemes does not have a layer that corresponds to the TCP/IP internet layer. Now see, दिस इज अ डायग्राम फॉर एन TCP/IP लेयर. अच्छा जी, एक चीज आपने समझ लेनी है कि आपकी जो लेयर 1 होती है ना, दैट मस्ट बी स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम द डाउन, फ्रॉम द लोअर साइड. ठीक है, लेयर 1 आपकी कभी भी ऊपर वाली नहीं होगी. लेयर 1 इज कॉल्ड एज योर फिजिकल लेयर. Second layer is called as your network interface, that is called as layer 2. I'm not talking about an OSI model. I'm talking about right now regarding the TCP/IP protocol suite. ठीक है जी. तो layer 3 is called as your internet layer. Layer 4 is called as your transport layer, and layer 5 is called as your application layer. Right? एक चीज. Secondly, you have a data flow always being from top to down. I mean layer 5 to layer 1 की तरफ आपके पास डेटा फ्लो होगा. एंड व्हाई द डेटा फ्लो इज फ्रॉम टॉप टू डाउन, बिकॉज सर्टेन सॉर्ट ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन इज बीइंग अटैच्ड बाय डिफरेंट लेयर एट द डिफरेंट स्टेजेस. ठीक है, एप्लीकेशन लेयर से डेटा जब ट्रांसपोर्ट पे आएगा तो कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन अटैच होगी, उसके नीचे आएगा इंटरनेट लेयर के ऊपर तो कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन अटैच होगी. सो दिस इज हाउ योर थिंग्स आर गोइंग टू बी executed throughout the layering technology, right? So we have to discuss each layer individually. Layer 1 जो physical layer है, ठीक है, जिसको हमने first पे define किया है, correspond to basic network hardware layer and OSI. जैसे OSI के अंदर होता है आपके पास I mean bits में change करना, how your data would be sent over the media, all these things are going to be managed by the layer 1. That is very much similar to the layer in the OSI model that is called as your physical layer. ठीक है जी. Layer 2 पे आ जाएं. Layer 2 specifies how to organize data into frames. The same layer that is called as your network interface layer corresponds to the data link layer of your OSI model. OSI model के अंदर जो data link layer होती है उसका भी काम ये होता है कि उसने फ्रेम फॉर्मेट को डिफाइन करना होता है कि किस तरह से हमने डेटा को फ्रेम्स के अंदर ऑर्गेनाइज करना है. ठीक है, and I have told you that at a data link layer you have the frame formats, and in the OSI model again you have the frame, right? Then you have the layer 3 that is called as an internet layer. This is a different layer from the OSI model. Specify the format of packet sent across an internet and forward the packets. अब layer 3 जो है, this is responsible for an IP packets, जिसको हम कहते हैं कि जी source and destination IP. इसका काम क्या होता है कि पैकेट्स को across an internet send करना और पैकेट्स को forward करना from one router to another router. This is the responsibility of the internet layer. Then we have the layer 4, which is called as your transport layer, the same as your transport layer on your I mean to say that OSI model. What is the responsibility of the transport layer? It specifies how to ensure reliable transfer by using port numbers. I have told you that the TCP and UDP protocols are being used at the transport layer. So reliable concept of transfer जो है, the reliable communication is being measured or is going to be managed at the layer that is called as your transport layer. अब प्रोटोकॉल्स और सर्विसेज कौन सी चल रही होती हैं ये हम आगे चल के पढ़ेंगे, ये मैं आपको बताऊंगा. Layer 5 that is called as your like 6 and 7 in OSI specifies how one application use an internet. अब देखें हमारे पास कौन सी दो layers missing है. हमारे पास missing है presentation और session. These are the two layers which are missing, which are being present inside the OSI model. All other 5 layers are being present. So I have told you that this is application layer's responsibility is how the data would look like to the end user, कि किस तरह से डेटा आपके पास शो हो रहा है एंड यूजर को और एंड यूजर उसको interact कर रहा है directly with that particular information, right? So this is a complete layering architecture of TCP/IP model. There are 5 layers in TCP/IP model and there are 7 layers in OSI model. What the 2 layers which are missing from the OSI model? The presentation and session. The reason of missing of those particular layer is कि TCP/IP प्रोटोकॉल जो है वो आपके पास WAN के ऊपर वर्क करता है एंड दैट इज प्योरली वर्क ऑन द नेटवर्क, आई मीन इंटरनेटवर्किंग और द इंटरनेट लेयर। तो वहां पे हमारे पास डायरेक्टली कनेक्टिविटी कंप्यूटर की नहीं होती डिवाइसेस के साथ, ठीक है। दैट इज व्हाई देयर इज नो प्रेजेंटेशन एंड सेशन। व्हाट इज द रिस्पांसिबिलिटी ऑफ द प्रेजेंटेशन एंड सेशन लेयर? The responsibility of the presentation and session layer to create your data or to make your data that would be I mean to say that understandable to the end user, ठीक है, that would be helpful for the end user. That is why we are going to put it in such a way that कि हमने presentation और session को हटा दिया है because there is no any direct connectivity of a TCP/IP model with the OSI model, right? Hopefully that is clear to you guys. So host computers, routers and protocol layer. TCP/IP defines the term host computers to refer to any computer system that connect to an internet and runs applications. ठीक है, host computer हमारे पास कोई भी computer हो सकता है जो connect करता है internet को and runs an application. TCP/IP protocol make it possible for any pair of hosts to communicate despite hardware differences. Both host and routers need TCP/IP protocol software. Routers do not need layer 5 protocol for application as they do not run application. Now see, this is very important slide to understand. अब इसमें देखें वो चीज क्या कह रहा है, ये चीज अंडरस्टैंड करने की है कि TCP/IP के अंदर जब आप डिफाइन करते हैं तो होस्ट कंप्यूटर्स आपके कोई भी हो सकते हैं दो, ठीक है जी। दो कंप्यूटर्स अगर सेम नेटवर्क में हैं दैट्स फाइन। इफ दे आर ऑन द डिफरेंट नेटवर्क वी डोंट हैव टू बॉदर अबाउट देयर डिफरेंट हार्डवेयर कि अगर कोई कहीं पे ईथरनेट यूज हो रहा है और कहीं पे फ्रेम रिले या टोकन रिंग यूज हो रहा है, अल्टीमेटली दे डू हैव देयर ओन हार्डवेयर्स ना, उनके अपने स्विचेस होंगे, उनके अपने राउट आई मीन रिपीटर्स होंगे। और अगर ईथरनेट स्विच है तो ईथरनेट स्विच होगा, उनकी अपनी हार्डवेयर टेक्नोलॉजी अंडरलाइन हार्डवेयर टेक्नोलॉजीज होंगी। तो जो TCP/IP प्रोटोकॉल सूट है, दिस इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल टू वर्क इन सच अ वे दैट all underlying technologies have no any meaning. They are above these technologies and they just directly communicate between two layers. They are not being bothered about the hardware कि hardware कौन सा यूज हो रहा है। ठीक है जी, दो different networks हैं, we don't bother about that. I mean TCP/IP is going to ensure us. TCP/IP is responsible to communicate with each other whether कोई कौन सा नेटवर्क है, कोई दूसरा नेटवर्क है, लेकिन ये TCP/IP की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि वो डिफरेंट होस्ट कंप्यूटर्स को आपस में कम्युनिकेट करवाए, right? So this is what the basic idea. And the summary is motivation for internetworking, concept of universal services, internet architecture, a virtual network क्या होता है, layering and TCP/IP protocols and host computers, routers and protocol layers. So this is what we have completed, this is what we have done today.